Good morning. There are problems arising in this country which are caused by a parliament which is out of control, pretending to be a government when they are not. They are a parliament. They are not sovereign and they're not supreme according to the people who framed the Constitution. Obviously, they knew what they were talking about. Now, dealing with Mr. Albanese, he talks about my government, referring to himself. There is no my government, Albanese. There's no such thing. It's a parliament, not a government. They do not put laws together. That is the job of the Executive Council, selected by the Governor-General under the provisions of 61 to 68 of our Constitution. Clear. Have you got that clear? You have the Director of ASIO standing next to you and you quote that you're talking about terrorists, traitors, treasoners. You should pick up a mirror and look in it and point at yourself and call yourself those names. Are you a terrorist? Yes, you are. Why? Because the criminal code says for the Parliament to use an experimental drug on the people is an act of terrorism. It's a vaccine, which is an experimental one. That's out of the mouth of the health minister at the time. Every political party just let it go through and ignored it, and you knew it was criminal. If you didn't, what are you doing in our parliament not knowing the law? If you don't know, you have to. You profess to be in authority. So for you to allow the different states to inject people with an experimental vaccine, it's not whether it works or whether it's law, it has any action which will help the people, good or bad. It's an issue, it's experimental. To use it is an act of terrorism on the people. That's number one. Number two, you sat by, probably because Dan Andrews is a good little Labor boy, you allowed him to have people fire on the citizens of this country. The members who are the Commonwealth, the people, fired on them. Were the people throwing knives at them, pointing sticks at them? No, they were running from them. Why? Because they were carrying out a protest. So Dan Andrews decided he could fire on them. That is a terrorist act. Why haven't you done something about it? Why isn't Dan Andrews standing trial? Why isn't he? Because you don't have the guts to do it. And you're not going to do it because he's either a Fabian, a Freemason, or a member of the Labor Party. The Labor Party was started and run by the Fabian Society. Like it or lump it, that's a fact, and you know it. Bob Hawke was high up in the Fabians. That's a wolf in sheep's clothing. Lie for the better good and all that nonsense. Then you look at what's going on in this country. You and your mob, and the idiots as well, who are in the Liberal Party, Labor, National, Greens, put through legislation that if the United Nations come here, they are exonerated from any prosecution. You are allowing a foreign army to come to this country and do whatever they want without repercussions under our law. First, you can't bring them here. That's an act of terrorism. To allow them to wander freely here and shoot at us, do what they like, and no recourse in law, that's terrorism. You're allowing people to come here on visitors' visas from a war zone. Does everybody agree with what you're doing in that, what's happening in that area? No. Is it our business? No, it's not. So why are they refugees that have to come here when their own Arab states who are Muslim like them won't allow them to go there? Why? Because they don't want them there. They're dangerous. They're extremists. They're terrorists. Why aren't you stopping them? Because you've got no guts. You're too busy lying and making out you're this, you're that. You are, at greatest, the foreman of the Parliament, the Speaker, nothing else. Because there is no office of Prime Minister in this country. Or Premiers, if there is. I've got the Constitution, your version of the Constitution, 1986, in front of me. It doesn't say that. I've read it. you lie, you cheat, you steal, and sit in our parliament and then claim somehow we're terrorists. And we've got donkeys in Western Australia called public officers that are not police, and they're not police. They're public officers. You can't be both. It's separated by the Criminal Investigation Act as police officers or public officers. A public officer is a creature of statute, can never be an officer of the Crown. Now, legal is all the enactments that have gone through the Parliament in this country since Federation. Definitely is. Because, why? We've never had a lawful Parliament. I just made a list of a few. This is it. Australian Electoral Act 1973. Who said you can have an Electoral Act? It overrides Section 8. The qualification of electors of senators shall be in each state that which is prescribed by this Constitution or by the Parliament as a qualification for electors of members of the House of Representatives, but in the choosing of senators, each elector shall vote only once. We're not voting only once. The papers require us to vote for, look at that, a political party, or 12 or 20 odd members below the line, or 8 people for the House of Representatives. So let's look at that. Section 30. Until the Parliament otherwise provides, the qualification of electors of members of the House of Representatives shall be in each state that which is prescribed by law of the state as a qualification of electors of the more numerous House of Parliament of the state. But in the choosing of members, each elector shall vote only once. Why? And that's a letters patent. Now, until the Parliament of the Commonwealth otherwise provides, the Parliament of any state may make laws for determining the divisions in each state for which members of the House of Representatives may be chosen, but the number of members to be chosen for each division, a division shall not be formed out of parts of different states. In the absence of other provision, each state shall be one electorate. Well, the problem is, the Constitution Chapter 1, and this confirms, it's a total electorate of one state, until the Parliament otherwise provides. But the Constitution Act, Commonwealth Constitution Act 1900 UK, was put in place on the 29th of October 1900 with a letters patent. The monarch never signed off on it. Only the monarch can change a letters patent. So the provisions for the Parliament to provide are gone. So where do we reference? Queen Victoria knew the garbage that was put in here by some people, so she removed the right to change it unless she had to say. Queen Victoria. And that's Clause 8. Clause 8. It says, when the colonies become states, the Boundaries Act no longer applies. There's your boundary, divisions, whatever. Their boundaries. Doesn't apply anymore. However, when the Commonwealth is established, it's established as a self-governing colony of England. A self-governing colony, not an independent sovereign nation, as a senior partner in a huge or big or large, whatever he wanted to promote himself to, said that it was established as an independent sovereign nation. That is a lie. I'm not going to name the company. This is not about denigrating him. He's obviously been lied to and believes it. He also believes that we can't ignore unlawful laws made outside the authority granted by the Constitution. The framers stated in the Red Book that Anne Toomey doesn't particularly like but uses at her convenience, that states neither the federal nor the state parliament are sovereign bodies. They're only legislatures with limited authority. If they attempt to pass a law in excess of that authority, the law is a nullity, affords no obedience. We can ignore it. How far? Chief Justice Sir John Latham stated, when the Parliament or the court rules wrong or passes a law that's incorrect, the people can ignore it with impunity. The people, not the politicians. So in a recent statement by a particular person. He said the Parliament cannot ignore the Constitution or the law. They must comply with decisions of the High Court and the Constitution. Anything else is a lie. Is it? Yes. What does this give the Parliament the right to do? This, by the way, is a Constitution as altered to the 31st of October 1986, a government book. A government book of lies, because it adds the Statute of Westminster. Now, to that gentleman from the law company, you said if the people want to dispute a law, we've got to take it to court. No, we don't. We can ignore it with impunity. Understand that. You know what the word impunity means. You argue that point, you're a liar. You put forward that the Parliament of the colony was set there, and when the colonies came together, as an independent sovereign nation. Clause 8 says it's established as a self-governing colony of England. When we voted in 1999, we voted to retain the system of the Crown, which is we are a self-governing colony of England. All the rest of your nonsense has gone out the door, including the Australia Act. But having said that, I'll read something else. And Toomey says that Doc Whitlam had the authority to do all this. Australia Citizenship Act 1973, a lie and a fraud, backdated to 1948. It wiped it out. You can't backdate legislation in this country, but that act is out of the Constitution. You have to be naturalised, not become a citizen of Australia. You can't become a citizen of Australia. You can become a citizen of the Commonwealth by way of the Constitution. You domicile here, that is your citizen. You are naturalised into the British Empire as a subject of the ruling monarch. That is naturalisation, which you have to do. If you leave England to come to here, you come here, you don't need a passport. Oh, that's another money-making racket the government wanted and controlled, so they knew who went in and out. Not your business. Do you know that? Yes. I eavesdropped on the computer next to me when I was making application to get a pension, which is a pittance, but anyway, let's not get into that bit. And on there is every time I went in and out of this country. Why did you have to know that? What was it? Did I commit any offences overseas? No. Did I treat those people with respect? Absolutely. Never fell foul of the law in any of those countries. Why do I need a passport? We don't. We can travel freely throughout the British Commonwealth. But let's go on to this. Family Court Act of Australia, 1975. A Star Chamber hearing where a single judge sits in judgment of everybody. HCA 29 of 2009, the High Court ruled that the military courts couldn't sit as a single judge and threw out 6 years of court cases because they breached habeas corpus. Now, HCA 44 of 2010, the High Court ruled 1688 Bill of Rights habeas corpus. Look at that. And all other imperial law is law in this country and must be abided by. So where do you get off saying we're an independent nation? We're not. We are a self-governing colony of England. Have we ever had a lawful federal parliament? Absolutely not. We haven't. And Toomey, one of your people, and she's your person, definitely your person, she stated, look at that, we need 6 states to form the first federal parliament. We didn't have them. We had 5. Western Australia was made a state of the Commonwealth, which is the people of the Commonwealth. To be lawfully constituted, it had to sit under its constitution. Western Australia sat under an unlawful constitution with 32 sections missing. So even though it was established as a state, it could not provide lawful representatives of that state to form the six, in case you can't count, that's 6 states to create, whose representatives create the first federal parliament. You didn't have it. So that's another lie. But that wasn't out of your mouth, or was it indirectly? Could be. By the parliament? Indirectly? Could be. But Anne Toomey was saying it. She said Gough Whitlam could sign anything outside of Australia under foreign powers. No. Federal Court Act of Australia 1976. Chapter 3 establishes the framers have stated clearly in Chapter 3, both in the Constitutional Act text and in the interpretation by them who wrote it. According to Anne Toomey, it's a book written by two people. Nonsense. It's written by all the framers of the Constitution. So the Federal Court Act of Australia had to be established under Chapter 3. So did the Family Law Act. Australian Federal Police Act. No, they're Commonwealth Police. Who told you could change their status to Australian Federal Police? We didn't. We never approved it. You can't. High Court of Australia Act 1979. Now, the big problem you have with that, where's the separation of powers between the parliaments, the executive and the courts? The High Court of Australia is our court. All courts are part of a federal judicial system with a High Court sitting at the summit, determined by our Constitution. The framers have clearly made that clear in Chapter 3 that is the case. In the Cable decision, CLR 189 of 1996, which is binding on the courts, judges and people of every state. Aren't politicians people? Yes, they are. So it's binding on them. So if they pass a law in excess of that, that's an act of terrorism when you're taking over our courts, and you have. And now you're making rules that control our court, and you do. Treason, fraud, and terrorism. You're taking away the rights of the people of this country without their permission. That is a terrorist act. You're doing something against the will of the people that harms them greatly. That's terrorism. Sure as little green apples, you shot the people when you put all this crap in place that stops us exercising our free will as sovereign subjects of the reigning monarch. Not Queen Elizabeth, Queen of Australia, King Charles, King of Australia. There's no such thing. The oath contained in our Constitution requires you swear the oath to the reigning monarch. Read it. As it progresses, it changes. There's never been a reigning monarch of the Queen of Australia or the King of Australia. If there is, show me. It is created by a parliament that's pretending to be a government, which is you, Albanese. I won't call you Albert Sleazy, even though some of the people do. It's derogatory and I don't believe that should happen. I'm calling you a terrorist, a traitor, a liar and a treasonous person. You are. Because you're claiming it's your government when it's ours. That's a lie. So we're telling the truth here. So we're taking your legal nonsense and make it lawful truth. Understand that. What's truth? Each state constitution says the parliaments of the state can pass laws for the good governance and the well-being of that state, subject to this. Their constitutions continue subject to this. This Commonwealth Constitution Act, which I'm referring to in this book, is a binding act. It's also the act which allows us to have a constitution. It states that in the preamble. Now let's look at what the framers of the Constitution decided before they created the act which Queen Victoria approved. The supreme, absolute and uncontrollable authority remains with the people. Page 676, the Parliament is not supreme, and the very essence of federation is that must be so. The Parliament, like everybody else, is subject to the law and must abide by it. Why do I know this? Because I read it and it's in here. The framers said that. The framers said it. Now, page 791. Neither the federal nor the state parliament are sovereign bodies. They're simply legislatures with limited authority. If they attempt to pass a law in excess of that authority, the law is a nullity and affords no obedience. There goes that head of the legal firm and your submission and to me that the Parliament is supreme and sovereign. It's not. It's not. That's a lie. How do we know? Page 346 says, not all enactments of the Parliament are valid. What are enactments? Acts, statutes, rules, regulations, mandates, codes, and all your little regulations that you call law are not, because you don't have a lawful governor to sign off on them. Or a lawful governor general at federal level. You're not going to anyway. Since 1960, none of them are. So they're not law. Now it says not all enactments of the parliaments are valid. Only those enactments made pursuant to, in accordance with, and under the authority granted by the Constitution. And those laws only are binding on the courts, judges and people. They, until they're signed off by the governors of the states or the Governor General at federal level, lawful ones, we haven't had them since 1960, you've got to put them back in, under the letters patent issued by Queen Victoria, because it's current. You can't change that. The Parliament's not sovereign and supreme. It can't do what it likes. So you're lying. So you don't have any laws. You have acts, statutes, rules and regulations and codes with absolutely no authority. So the mandate to force everybody the police used to drag people off the street, lock them up and charge them and fine them had no value in law. Mandate is not law. And even if it was, it would have to comply with the Constitution. Can't. There's no emergency powers granted by the Constitution. If there is, show me. Show me where a parliament that debates and passes legislation in the House of Representatives and puts it on to the Senate, who checks whether it complies with the Constitution and rejects it if it doesn't. Then it must go to the Governor-General for the signification of the representative of the Crown. But therein lies your problem, because the Commonwealth Constitution Act 1900 UK, like every other state constitution, was put in place with a letters patent, was subject to signification by the reigning monarch. It hasn't been done. It's a law. It's unlawful. It's fraud. You lied again and cheat. That is legal, but it's not lawful. Lawful is the truth. Legal is lies. Now you've got a bigger problem, Anthony, because you made some claims about Magna Carta. This book, see the royal insignia on there? Up until 1600, the Roman Church, or Roman Catholic Church, either way you like it, who started Islam and the Catholic religion. I'm not knocking people who are Catholics. A lot of my friends are, and they're good people. That's not the issue. The issue is, this came about. This was changed to the royal identifier with the unicorn next to it. How? Lots of people would say you've got the St. George crown, they got this, they got the other. They were Catholics. Roman Catholics. Now, the bishops, the full bishops, went to Rome and disputed the Roman Catholic teachings. This is Lord Coke on Magna Carta. You should read it, Anthony, this one. Lord Coke on Magna Carta, you'd understand, but you can't really comprehend it because you've been taught lies and you stick to those lies. This book says that the bishops went to Rome and disputed some of the teachings in the Catholic Church, one of them being the inability for priests to marry, and a lot of other things. Now, William, Prince of England, and Mary, Princess of Scotland, wanted to marry. To marry, they had to comply with the wishes of the barons, and there wasn't a couple barons put Magna Carta together. It was almost all of them, or all of them. It doesn't actually state their number, and it certainly wasn't a couple. So that statement by you, Anthony, was a nonsense. Not true. Change it or shut up, one of the two. It's your choice. Don't bother reading it, because you can't read lies into truth. Now, this book is written by somebody who you should take notice of, Lord Macaulay, History of England to the Death of William III. The reason I refer to this is about the revolution in England in 1600. And what happened then? When the bishops came back, they came back as archbishops because they were in disputes with the Pope, in total dispute. So what was their religion? Was it Protestant? Yes. What does the word Protestant mean? Protesting the law. Protestant. Protests. It's a protesting religion. That's why almost all of what it did was the same as the Catholic Church, except for the fact they were allowed to marry, they were allowed other things, but it still carried out the same duties. So when Mary and William III got married, they had to put in place the coronation oath. And look at that. It contained the Constitution of England, Magna Carta, the 1688 Bill of Rights, the 1700 Act of Settlement, the 1673 Act of Habeas Corpus, and the King James Bible. This authorised version. Why? Because the Catholic Bible was wrong, according to this. And it is. Constantine had a good fiddle with the Bible and removed a lot of things from it, including the Book of Enoch. How do we know this? Because the Ethiopian Bible has it in it, and a lot of other stuff in it, which didn't form or follow the Roman narrative. Not the Catholic narrative, the Roman narrative. There's a difference. I'm not knocking the Catholic Church. I'm stating a fact. Now, when they married, they joined Scotland to where? England. They joined Scotland to England. And that's how the unicorn became part of the British Commonwealth and the insignia. And it went from a single line of Judah, which was a line of David, which Romans took control of. I don't know if the identifier is on here, but it doesn't matter. The royal identifier went from this to the line of Judah and the unicorn. The unicorn was chained to the crown. So what was the religion then? It was Protestant, but it was also Presbyterian. Don't like that? Too bad. That was the religion of Scotland at the time, part of it. They also had Freemasonry and everything else in it. That's religion. I'm not getting into that debate because it was there, it was used. But Scotland became part of England. Now, there's a lot of debate on what Revelation says in the authorised King James Bible and a lot of what things mean. And I'm not going to get into that because I'm still researching it. But I tell you now, Anne Termy, Magna Carta in its complete form is a forever law. Habeas corpus in its complete form is a forever law. The Act of Settlement in its complete form is a forever law. 1688 Bill of Rights in its complete form is a matter of forever law. The King James Bible is a matter of forever law. Why? Because it was sealed with the royal seal and backed up by the barons who are the House of Lords. Now, this book explains it all. You should get it and read it. It's a very interesting book. There's 3 others in the series. I've only managed to get one so far. But this explains the revolution and how the Church of England never dumped the Catholic Church. It just disputed the things it was doing because in their eyes the bishops said they were wrong. A right of everybody to dispute what a man says when the Bible is a spiritual book, the Word of God. You can argue all you like. I don't believe in God. Sorry about that. I feel sorry that you don't. You're missing out on a lot. But nonetheless, the law is the law. These laws are forever laws. If you think back, or you remember, or you bothered to look at it, Queen Elizabeth went before the British Parliament and said, "You touch the Act of Settlement and I'll sack the Parliament." Why? Because she could. But is King Charles III have absolute authority? No, he doesn't. No, he doesn't. Who came back from Rome? The archbishops. Why? Because the church was above both houses of the British Parliament, the High Court, and all the barons. They didn't go against God's word. They went against the teachings of the Roman Church, nothing else. That's why it became the protest religion or Protestant religion. But then out of Scotland came the teachings of Martin Luther, part of it. There was some in England anyway, and some on the continent already since the 15th century. History teaches us that, but you haven't bothered to look at that either. So the Presbyterian Church also was in there. In our Constitution, 116 says no government can legislate against a person's religion, nor can they question it, nor can they make it as a condition of being in the public service. But you must swear the oath contained in this Constitution, 1 William and Mary, that's law. It is imperial law, forever law. Every public servant or person who exercises authority in this country must be able to show where the authority is granted, and must, before taking their position, swear the oath of allegiance. Kirby stated in Forge versus ASIC, HCA 44, 2006. Not only permanent judges, but temporary judges must swear the oath of allegiance before taking their oath of office. Before. Section 42 of this says every senator and every member of the House of Representatives, before taking their seat, must swear the oath contained in this. Not the oath to the King of Australia, the Queen of Australia, or any other moron, because they don't exist. We are a self-governing colony of England. We chose in 1999 to retain that. Anything you have in there is treason, fraud, treachery to overturn the Constitution, wage war on the Crown, and look at that, terrorism. And you have passed laws, you call laws, but they're only acts and they're lies, to allow a foreign mob who we don't have anything to do, we did not grant the right under 128 to join the United Nations. It required that. Why? Because the High Court ruled it. The plenary powers described in the Constitution are in the legislative authority granted subject to the Constitution. It doesn't really fit the description of plenary power, which is absolute and complete, and it's not. And Toomey can't work that out, or hasn't bothered, or just doesn't want to tell the truth. She's got to work it out. Every time I've watched Anne Toomey's videos over the last couple of weeks, because people say, oh, you don't know, this is wrong, that's wrong. No. Anne Toomey has gone through a long list of things. But when you look, for the first one, she was looking at the bottom and reading the text there. When I brought it to attention, it swapped. Now she looks at the lens, but her eyes stay fixed, but her eyeballs move following the text. She's still reading what someone else wrote. Watch it and see. It's there. Now, Anne Toomey, I think, should be removed from her position because until she learns the truth and starts teaching the truth. Every politician in this country must prove their authority. Every judge, magistrate, registrar, or anything else sitting in our courts has to prove their authority. Why? Because we said so. What are we doing about it? We have a case before the High Court that says they have to prove it. It's an application for a writ of quo warranto to order anybody exercising authority, all the judges, a whole lot, prove their authority. And they can't. It's been there almost 6 weeks and they haven't answered it. Why? Because to answer it, they've got to put themselves in jail. They're locked up for treason and fraud. They have no authority. No crown, no right, no authority. Into the story. So legal is nonsense, it's lies. Law is act, statutes, rules, regulation, everything else made according to our Constitution. The framers of this Constitution interpreted it. Why? Because they could. And why? Because they put it together. Why would you listen to the interpretation of Anne Toomey or any other so-called professor, including red-headed Dave from Western Australia, who's a constitutional expert, and then states, contrary to Section 68 of the Constitution, the political parties control the military. No, they don't. The Governor-General does. on behalf of the Queen or King or the reigning monarch. That's a fact of law. Sorry, Dave, you got it wrong. Sorry, Anne Toomey, you're totally wrong. This book says, in relation to Magna Carta, which you quoted, can be changed any time. That's a lie. The British Parliament can't change their constitution. The people can. And this book says you're a liar. You should read it and see how many lies you've been telling. If you don't bother, you become that lie. At present, you're just spreading lies. So have a nice day. Thank you.